Hello. Yeah, we're late today, so let's get to it straight away. There's a debate in Kenya. They want to introduce a new curriculum. So I thought that I might go over the old one. I didn't have enough time to do research today. Let's say less than an hour. So here, let's do this. What is a curriculum? Before you decide to change something, you need to know what it is. If you don't know what it is, then you can't change it, and you can't even contribute to the debate on it, right? So anyway, let's talk about a curriculum. I use a definition by some guy from South Africa. His name is KP Perez. Okay, what he does, he has a romantic view of a curriculum, right? Because he said it's a developmental process of constructing knowledge and experience, right, in such a way that to increase the ability of a student to grow in a spiritual and emotional maturity as well as academic excellence. So basically, it's a romanticized version of a curriculum. Because most of the people, they just define it plainly. It's just a syllabus. This is how you're going to teach. This is what you're going to teach. Do not move out of these parameters. That's how he defines it. But this guy moves a step further because he talks about spiritual and emotional maturity. And think about the Kenyan curriculum, right? The 844 that we have now. Does it promote use? Did it promote you emotionally? Did it promote you spiritually? And when it came to academic excellence, did it do its job? Because that's what it was supposed to do, according to Perez, right? So anyway, he goes further, like the characteristics of curriculum development, right? It's a process. And that's why you hear people talking about 844. It's a process. 8 years of primary, 4 years of secondary, and 4 years of tertiary education, right? It's a process. It's orderly, it's logical, constructing knowledge. The teachers are supposed to come with this syllabus, right? They're supposed to teach this. By the end of this lesson, these students are supposed to learn this. By the end of this number of years, these students are supposed to do this standardized test. It's an orderly process. And we're trying to organize our education system, and I'll get to that, right? Our education system in such a way that we can look at it in terms of a system, and when you have a system, you can change it, and you can do a lot with it. Anyway, the aim of it, right, is to promote, like I said, Perez promotes students emotionally and spiritually. This is a romanticized version of a curriculum. Most of the guys, they just speak about syllabus, teach this, do not move out of these parameters, right? So anyway, where does the word curriculum come from? It's as always, it's Latin, right? And it comes from the word cora, which means a race. So we need to think about it like from its origin. It's a race. And are we racing against each other, or are we in a race against our own time on this earth, that we need to do something before that time comes to an end? So let's think about that, right? In this race, is it a curriculum that you're developing for students to race against each other, or to race against themselves, to try and achieve something for themselves before their time is up? So anyway, that was just a bit off what I was saying. And then there's the traditionalist orientation, and then there's the progressive orientation. Again, this is the South African dude who's developed this one. And the traditionalist orientation is that you teach, it's just a systemized body of knowledge. You develop like teachers sit down, they say what should be taught in history, and they pass it through legislation and all the other things through a certain body. And then that's what you'll teach. The teachers move by a step-by-step process, like a manual, right? And the teachers, they usually have books, and those books, they have like what the students are supposed to learn at the end of this lesson, at the end of the years in school, where they're supposed to learn all of those things. And then here's the big thing, the traditional orientation is kind of like the knowledge consists of facts and concepts and skills, and you must master them. You have no choice, you must master them, right? And how do you do that? Through memorization and drills. And that is why we had students who used to sleep at 3 a.m. in the night. Other students used to wake up at 3 a.m. So a bunch of students are going to sleep at 3 a.m. and a bunch of students are waking up at 3 a.m. because they have to master these facts, these concepts. That's the traditionalist approach, right? And I think that's the one that we have today, because in my time, we used to have guys like in secondary who used to sleep at 3 a.m., right? In primary, we used to have guys who never went to play outside. When it's the PE lesson, they just sit in the class reading. So that's the traditionalist kind of orientation. Then there's the progressive, like this guy, the South African guy, he has these progressive ideas, the romanticized version of a curriculum, like an emphasis on relevant content. Like whatever you're learning, it should be relevant to your time. And then instead of seeing education as an end, they see education as a product that can be modified, that can be twisted to suit yourself and your situation, and that you need to interact with the world. That's a very, very important point. Like when you sleep at 3 a.m. or when you wake up at 3 a.m., are you interacting with the world? And if you're not interacting with the world, then how is it impacting you emotionally and spiritually? You get those ideas? So that's the thing. Those are the things that we need to, whenever they're debating about these things on the telly and everywhere, think about what we've talked about right now. Are they talking about those issues? Are they talking about the spiritual and emotional development of a child? Are they talking about a child knowing facts, or as knowledge in terms of it's a means to an end, not an end in itself, right? Are they talking about how a student would interact with the world and interpret it? So anyway, just to add on a bit more about curriculums, there's a planned curriculum, a received, and a hidden one. The planned one is the one that comes with it in the classroom. So this is what you're supposed to learn, and this is how you're supposed to learn it. And the received curriculum, those are your experiences when you're in school. Like waking up at 3 a.m. That's an experience that you had in school. Like teachers not responding to what questions that you had. That's an experience that you had in school. The teachers perhaps picking on you, students picking on you. There is what you received when you went in school, as opposed to what was planned, right? And at times, what you receive might be more impactful in your life than what was planned for you. Then there's the hidden curriculum, right? The hidden curriculum is the implicit knowledge that students learn in school. Like when you go to school, you might not learn how to interact with people from the textbooks. The teacher might not call you aside and teach you how to interact with students, but you might learn how to interact with them. Like if you went to Dagoretti High School, like I did, you would learn how to interact with people very fast and very quickly, because you had to survive. So anyway, I'm hoping that I've given the background to all of these things. I'm hoping that it's taking you back in time to where you are. So let's now get back to Kenya. And I use a study by Lydia Nganga. She's from the University of Wyoming. And this is what she divided like the Kenyan education system into three: pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial, right? So we had an education system before the British came. We had an education system. So what was it? What was our education system? What did we focus on? So here's the thing. You remember that a curriculum is spiritual and emotional development, right? So this is what the African system, this is what we focused on. We focused on values. We focused on languages. We focused on beliefs. We focused on worship, right? So we did that as Africans before the Europeans came. We were good. We were doing things. And then we taught knowledge not as an end, but as a means to an end. That you would learn something, and then that craft would enable you to survive in life. It will enable you to interact with the world. That's what we did as Africans before the Europeans came. That's who we were, right? And it didn't have to be tests. It was instructional. and then we had a hands-on approach, right, as opposed to theoretical. So that's what he had. Now let's go to colonial education, right? For colonial education, it was simple. They what Lydia says is that they adopted an approach. They call it the Asomi approach. Asomi approach. And their idea was to bring Western values and culture into our education system. So these guys they were on point, right? They were on point. Because again, education is about spiritual, moral, and academic excellence. And then interpreting with the world in a way that's beneficial and practical to you, right? So these guys were really, really on point. They wanted new values. We already had our education system with our own values, but they wanted new values. So they put that there. They wanted to show that they're superior. They put that there, right? And then they came to how you come to know things, right? I don't know what's the technical name for it, pedagogy or something. I'm not sure. But how you come to learn things, it's very, very important. And they put doubt in us, right? Because here, this is what Lydia says. There was extra negative scrutiny that was placed on traditional ways of knowing. Like how we knew things, we'd say that our ancestors used to do that. Then the British would say, and where are ancestors today? Where did they write that? Where's the scientific evidence for that? And all of those things. So our ways of knowing, they were put into doubt. And we had to adopt new ways of knowing. European ways of knowing, right? And those European ways of knowing, they came with new values. It's not that we were taught new ways of knowing with our own values. They came with new values. And that's the problem that we had, right? And then they introduced English as the national language, of course. And here's what Lydia says. The British introduced what they call a monitor system. Class prefect. Monitor in your class. And the specific function of the monitor was to tell on people who are speaking English, who are not speaking English. So that's where that idea came from, the monitors, right? That you spoke a language that was your own instead of the colonial language, and they would write your name down. And we continued with that up to today, right? And we wonder where the home guards came from. So anyway, that was English. Then they came with the idea of boarding schools. The idea of boarding schools, according to Lydia, was to separate the students from their cultural influences, to keep you aside. Like, let's say if you are Maasai, and the Maasais had their own cultures, their own customs, and all of those things. They didn't want you to have that. They wanted you to adopt new values. And so they put you aside in boarding schools. Today people go to boarding schools to... The theory is that they don't want the kids perturbed by, let's say, poverty that's in the home or things like that. But you can see where the boarding schools came from. To isolate us from our culture, from our people. And that's what we are continuing with today. Anyway, so the colonial education again was to teach you basics, right? Read and write, so that when the white man sends you, you know what you will buy at the shop. That was the colonial education. The teaching of skills, like the white collar jobs, it was limited. And what Lydia says, prohibited. Because what is your business trying to learn the white man's job? What is your business trying to do that? And then you're supposed to learn to read and write so that you could understand the religious instruction, like the Bible and all those things. Again, education for spiritual, curriculum for spiritual and emotional maturity, in addition to academic excellence, in addition to the ability to interpret the world and to have practical skills to survive in this world, right? But you see, the white man was a bit unfair, right? Because he developed now segregated schools, like schools for Africans, for the whites, and for Indians, and for Arabs. And each one of them was taught differently. Like the Africans are taught the basics, read and write, so that when you are sent to the shop, you know what you're going to buy. So that the white man tells you to stop, you know what stop means, right? So that was the idea. So black schools were taught that. And the basics, you know, if the white man comes and tells you that this farming method is good for you, then you need to understand that that farming method is good for you, right? You don't need to know anything else. You don't need to know how to develop that farming method. You just need to know that it's good for you. So that was the idea, the segregation of schools. So we abandoned segregation in 1960s, right? And then Christian groups were instrumental in that, because now we removed that spiritual and emotional element from being, bundled together with colonial values. So now we could have spirituality, we could have emotional growth, and we could have African values. So that's a credit to the Christian schools. What are the Christians doing about the curriculum today? That's a topic for another day. Anyway, post-colonial education, now the white man has gone. Yeah, it's freedom, and we're Africans. So introduce free primary education, and then we had to take it away. So introduce it again. Africans, keep going in circles. Anyway, the idea of free primary education at that time was to relieve, there was a problem in terms of skilled manpower, right? Because the colonialists focused on teaching basic skills. So now we had so many people without basic skills. So many people. So we had to, you guys go to school, learn these basic skills, and then get out of school, right? And then get, jobs and all those things, because we needed those ones. Here's what Lydia says: there were no social values taught at that time. No social values. So again, our ancestors, they taught social values. The colonialists taught social values. But the independent African, he had no social values within the education system, well inculcated within the education system. Now you can see where the problem started. I'm hoping you see that. So anyway, just to continue, the independent African decided to introduce the 7-4-2-3 education system. People praise it, but Lydia calls it an elitist education system. Why does she call it that? Because it's based on the colonial system, right? It's based on the colonial system. And we introduced this one so that people could have white-collar jobs. And who are those to gain those white-collar jobs? They were the elitists, those who could gain education as fast and as quickly as possible. And so with the introduction of this system, Africans continue to lack essential skills, right? Because we needed practical skills. Yes, we needed clerks, we needed all those guys, but we couldn't fit so many clerks because there are only so many government positions. We needed businesses to grow. And what do you need for business to grow? We need the practical skills. And here we're introducing an education system for white-collar jobs, right? Because it's a Western system, and Western it's mostly white-collar, right? So again, we had to modify it in 1969. But again, people were very, very opposed to it, because they really wanted an education system that prepared them for white-collar jobs. Who are these people? They're not people in the rural areas, right? Who are these people? It's the elitist. So anyway, we continued with this system, right? The one that promoted white-collar jobs. Prepared people for white-collar jobs. And what happened? By 1986, we had a surplus of people who were prepared for white-collar jobs, but there were no white-collar jobs. Is that a surprise? 20 million people in the country. This is 1986. Only 1.2 million formal employed formally. Right? And you're trying to think where this problem came from, right? It's obvious. It's obvious. So anyway, a new curriculum for the time was necessary, and emphasis was now on technical and science subjects. So this is the time now we started thinking that we can't have everybody working in white-collar jobs. So we need technical and science subjects. After how many years? 19. Anyway. So let's go to the 844. It focused on nationhood, national unity. Again, remember why it focuses on nationhood and national unity. This was after the coup attempt in 1982. So there really needs to be a focus on national unity and economic and nationhood. Again, of course, focus on economic needs. Like, we have a huge mass of people unemployed, and then people prepared for white-collar jobs. There are no white-collar jobs, right? So technical skills to help them. Now, like, their practical skills from where they are, not from where they have to apply, from where they are, what can they do. And then an emphasis on individual talents and personality development. Now here's the thing, I don't know if people notice this, because I think I noticed this when I started doing this, kind of like when I read this Lydia research. Primary level is supposed to prepare you for various crafts. So that's why we had home science and all of those things. So even from primary level, as soon as you leave primary, you're supposed to be okay, you're supposed to be good. You're supposed to be able to start to begin life from that point, as in with your craft, when push comes to shove, right? Secondary level was supposed to prepare you for vocational careers and trades, right? This is where you learn business, so perhaps you can set up your sole proprietorship somewhere and all of those things. That was secondary level. Just to continue, primary level, you're supposed to appreciate other people's views at primary level. That was the teaching, that was the essence of this thing. Can people do people in primary level appreciate other people's views? Now, there's something that we call the age of reason. The age of reason usually begins at 12, and that's when you'll notice that most people receive Holy Communion at the age of reason, because they're supposed to know what they are receiving. At primary level, you're supposed to be able to understand other people's views, and that was the teaching. But they don't. Even university graduates, they don't understand other people's levels. So again, there's the planned curriculum, there is the experience that kids have, and then there's the hidden curriculum, right? The planned curriculum was for people to appreciate other people's views by primary, for them to have crafts. When push comes to shove, they can survive, right? But is that their experience? Is that what they got from there? Move to secondary education, right? The guys who developed secondary education, their main focus for secondary education was to prepare students for adult life. Like, you're supposed to be prepared for adult life. You're supposed to be able to survive after secondary education. Like, university would have been something like, yeah, it's good, I'm going to campus. But it wasn't supposed to be absolutely necessary. Secondary education was supposed to prepare you for all of those things. And that's why they divided into categories, like there's the sciences, there's the humanities. It was supposed to be able to give you your talent in life so that you can pursue it. I personally did mental work. I think it was in first year, in Form 1 and Form 2. Like, if push came to shove, I should have been able to go out there and become a mental worker, right? Like welding and all those things, and survive. So that was the idea behind secondary school, and that's why we had those, like, woodwork, like metal work, and all of those other things. And then that's why you'd have sciences and you'd have other things, so that you could learn your talent. Where's your talent at, right? And it was supposed to prepare you for adult life. Was that your experience? It wasn't my experience. So anyway, challenges of 844. This is what they had, like, challenges for 844, right? One, it was implemented in a hurry. The government wanted a legacy, and it got a legacy. Like, Uhuru got the SGR legacy, but it was implemented too much, too fast, and there was no, like, a sunset period for adjustment to that curriculum, and that was a problem. So it started on a bad note. That's what I'm trying to say. And then it continued, like, implemented in a hurry. Another problem was that the student to teacher ratio was too high. Implementation of those programs was too much. Like, poor schools lack basic teaching resources, right? And then there are affluent schools. Again, let's move back to the elitist. We had schools in Nairobi, Kisumu, and all of those things, and then we had schools back in up country and all of those things. The government was supposed to fund these guys, right? But the government found it expensive, so it said that parents would be able to fund. Which parents? Parents are poor, so a discrepancy developed. Like, the old guys, the rural areas, they couldn't fund their schools. The urban areas, they could. So now, in performance, a problem came into being, and that problem is persisting until today, right? Okay, so let me just try and give an overview of these problems. Lack of teaching resources, which are supposed to be provided by parents who, like Lydia says, they were unwilling. There was a lack of an ideal transition period from the other education system into 844. Which is the other one? Like, the government required all primary schools to adopt 844 at once. That was in 1985, right? And this was against the recommendations of somebody called Fulan, right? That they needed to be a sunset period for those, like it needed to be implemented in small segments. So again, when Amina is talking about implementing it next year or in 2020, we need to think about it. Is it an ideal thing to do? Or perhaps we need segments, like over a 10-year period or something of that sort. I'm not sure, I'm just guessing. So schools sponsored by poor parents and schools sponsored by affluent families, right? The government, it moved back because it was too expensive. So now we have disparities developing. There are schools funded by poor parents, schools funded by affluent parents. The affluent parent schools, they're mostly in the cities and they had excess resources. The poor parent schools, they continue to fail. And that's the majority, right? And then the majority, what they were supposed to learn, like appreciating people's views and like being prepared for adult life, that is not the experience. That was the theoretical like planning they had, but that was not the experience. So what? So you'd have a high number of people with an education system, a curriculum that has a discrepancy between planned and actual experiences. So what they found actually did not help them to interpret the world, to adjust to this world in a positive way. But the rich kids, they were able to do that because now they had resources, and those resources would help in adjustments and all of those things. They had willing educators and all of those things. So again, poverty is bad, and it's not an accident, as you can see here. So there was a bit of pressure on people to succeed, because the idea now was you need to move to secondary so that you can get that white collar job. So again, as Africans, we came back to the idea of white collar jobs, even though 844 was supposed to take us to technical skills. So there was an emphasis now to reach university and to get that white collar jobs, because the experiences versus the plans were not working out at this primary and secondary level. So it's going back to what we had in the 1960s, the elitist kind of system, right? The white mind kind of system. So anyway, with this pressure to succeed, students felt the pressure and riots started. I just want to mention this one riot. In St. Kizito in 1991, like there were 20 serious riots in 1991. In one riot, 19 girls were killed. In one riot, 19 girls were killed, 72 were raped. I've never heard of that story. That's St. Kizito. It was a mixed secondary school. 19 girls killed, 72 raped. And again, the Ministry of Health, this one is the Ministry of Health, I think, because they were thinking it's a mental issue or something. It said that excessive overload, it affected these students and it affected their behavior. And this is what it led to. So when kids come home and they're a bit problematic, we put them in a problematic education system. We put them in a problematic curriculum. And I don't have hope that this new curriculum is addressing all of those issues in terms of implementation, in terms of planning versus in terms of the experiences that the students will have. So anyway, that is what I had for today. And I hope that you learned something. I always try to shorten my presentations. Like this one, I had limited time, but again, it's like a moving past time. So as we go forward, I hope that that this will help. Like 844, they're saying is poor funding, facilities overstretched, schools overcrowded, teacher-pupil ratio was high, and in poor schools, like all of those things. Anyway, hope that we'll address these things in future. I need to go. Time is bad. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I hope that you've learned something. I didn't have enough time today. Bye-bye, and take care.